Hi, everybody, and a good Monday to you. I hope you had a good weekend. The world didn't, just in case you tuned out. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving as well. The last hour I broadcast, which was last Wednesday prior to Thursday's Thanksgiving, was will you even have a Thanksgiving, or will a lot of people not show up because of COVID fears? And everyone who called said you're having a normal, or virtually everyone, that you will have a normal Thanksgiving. I wonder if that's because much of my audience is conservative and they are simply walking around life in general with fewer fears than people on the left. One of the ways to understand the left is that they are scared of life. They're scared of death and they're scared of life. That's why they have safe spaces at colleges, because they can't handle pain. There's a fundamental childishness to leftism, which produces this inordinate amount of fear in one of the safest, probably the safest place in human history, the West generally and the United States specifically. Of course, it's getting less safe, given what the left has done to cities, ruining cities and literally cultivating crime. The left cultivates crime. There is nothing the left touches it doesn't destroy. The world is in panic mode again. Omicron, is that the name? Omicron?
Omicron, yeah.
So I said Omicron.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. The president is talking about Omicron? I'm curious. Let's hear.
All other countries in the world combined, over 275 million vaccines to 110 countries. Now we need the rest of the world to step up as well. Let me be clear. Not a single vaccine shot Americans ever send to the rest of the world will ever come at the expense of any American. I will always make sure that our people are protected first. But vaccinating the world is just one more tool in how we need to meet our moral obligation as Americans and how to best protect Americans as well. The Delta variants and now the Omicron variant all emerged elsewhere in the world. So we can't let up until the world is vaccinated. We're protecting Americans by doing that as well. As we continue this effort, let's remember where we stand. We're in a very different place as we enter the month of December, this month, compared to where we were last Christmas. Last Christmas, fewer than 1% of American adults were vaccinated. This Christmas, the number will be over 71%, including more than 86% of seniors. Last Christmas, our children were at risk without a vaccine. This Christmas, we have safe and effective vaccines for children ages 5 and older, with more than 19 million children and counting now vaccinated. Last year, a majority of schools were closed. This year, 99% of our schools are open. Let me reiterate once more. We also now have booster shots that provide extra protection. They're free and convenient. There is still time to get your first 2 shots or your booster shot or get your children vaccinated before Christmas. All 3 are available and can be done before Christmas. If you and your family are fully vaccinated, you can celebrate the holidays much more safely. And given where we were last year, that's a blessing that none of us should take for granted. We're throwing everything we can at this virus, tracking it from every angle. And that's what we have to keep doing.
Okay.
That's how
all right. I wish I didn't interfere because it's not a tape and I didn't want you to hear less of the president. We're not doing everything we can. It's just not true. We're not trying to cure people of the illness when they get it. Nothing. Zero. The medical profession is a disgrace. He is a disgrace. Fauci is a disgrace. The drug companies are disgraceful. This is the first time I know of that we have devoted no effort, none, to remedying the situation, only preventing it. It's an astonishing thing. You get it, tough luck. Go to a hospital and drop dead. That's the attitude. There are perfectly safe remedies to COVID. None of this should have happened. I said it at the beginning. I say it again. All these lockdowns are a farce, are a destructive farce. The more you know, and I am learning more and more. I knew a lot, but I know a lot more today. Notice that, by the way, he said, we're in a very different place than last Christmas. Yeah, you're right. More people are dying of it. Did you know that more people died in 2021 than in 2020? More people died having the vaccine. In the year of the vaccine, more people died of COVID. The odds are overwhelming that I didn't die of COVID a month ago, or it was 6 weeks ago, because I actually took prophylactics. Incredibly safe pills called hydroxychloroquine and zinc. I know you've been brainwashed to believe it's dangerous. Thing has been taken hundreds of millions of times. It's one of the safest pills out there. So is ivermectin. And now with monoclonal antibodies, it's a virus. It's reduced to a virus, not a killer. Countries are shutting down. Can't fly from Africa. You think you're going to stop it? Is that the new procedure? Stop society every time there's a new variant? Then it's over. This is permanent. When will variants stop? Oh, the Delta, need a booster. Oh, Omicron. Oh, well, is there a booster for that? I'm sure there will be.
You want to hear Fauci? He's on there.
Fauci's on? I don't want to hear Fauci. And I could tell you what Fauci will say. Get vaccinated. That's they have nothing else to say. Get vaccinated. He's gone? Right. Get vaccinated. That's the answer. The brainwash is astonishing. Close down society. I was reading an article, I don't remember where, about the tourism industry in New Zealand. Guess what it's down by? Guess the number. What percent? Did you read the article? No. So guess the percent.
I'm going to say 90.
You missed. 95%. So a vast number of New Zealanders depend on tourism. It's a huge business. Or what else does New Zealand make money on?
Yeah.
A foreign currency is what I mean. How does it make foreign currency? On sheep?
Yeah.
It makes
wool.
Huh?
Yeah,
Wool, right.
Manuka honey.
And Manuka honey, I forgot that one. It's on tourism. What an ingenious idea. Have no one do anything. Stay in your homes indefinitely. That was the Australian and New Zealand answer. I read to you last week a devastating article on the damage done to children in the last year, 2 years almost. Schools are open. Oh my God, schools are open. Sure, if you wear a mask the whole time. Schools are open. And what is it? Are they still seated? Are they seated 6 feet from one another? Do they have to eat lunch 6 feet from one another? School is open? The schoolhouse is open. School is not open. When in doubt, isolate. That's it. I can now say that my belief is that hundreds of thousands of Americans died because of the medical establishment, the Democratic Party, the CDC, the NIH, and Bill Gates. This is the first time I've said that. I've heard it from scientists I've had on the show, and now I believe it. The reason? they were prevented from curing themselves. We'll be back.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
What is he charged with? First-degree murder?
That's right, 2 counts.
How is that possible? It's an altercation. I mean, first-degree murder is where you're like, I'm going to murder this person and go to their home with, not some sort of bar fight gone wrong.
Yeah, so you're right. Actually, that would be what you're talking about. Would potentially be either voluntary manslaughter.
Yeah, that's what I never understood about this.
Or second-degree murder because it was more indiscriminate. What they're saying is, what the prosecution's argument is that Kyle Rittenhouse brought his gun because he intended to murder these BLM protesters, and that he had a vengeful intent. Now, what's interesting to me is that the prosecution, just a few minutes ago before I came on the show, just rested in this case after about a week and a half of testimony. They did not present a single shred of evidence that Kyle Rittenhouse showed up with intent to hurt anyone.
Well, but this is what I can't understand, is that the judge, the pretrial, arguments, because this is just, you have months to submit, motions to dismiss. You're trying to tell me no one looked at this? They say, wait a second. You're charging a guy who got in an altercation, was, by the way, the guy that Kyle Rittenhouse killed in self-defense was like a child rapist or something, right? He was like a child pedophile or something. Is that right?
Multiple count child rapist. And honestly,
I'm not saying he deserves to die because of it, but
right. Details of that case, if anyone wants to see it, it's absolutely horrific.
This is not Gandhi, okay? But
what's interesting, though, what's actually relevant to this is that he had just been released from a hospital where he was being held on a psychiatric hold.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. All right. All right. Dennis Prager here, and want to remind you about saving money on your phone bill with Pure Talk. Pure Talk is so good, I signed up. First of all, I signed up, to be honest, because I would never recommend to you something for you to spend money on if I don't use it, if I endorse it. Suppose there are some ads that are read, but if I personally endorse it, I've used it. $30 a month, incredible, $30 a month. Unlimited text, unlimited talk, 6 gigabytes of data. And use, what you do is you go to pound 250, pound 250 on your phone, say Dennis Prager, you get half off the first month, and you can also get tremendous discounts on the latest phones. It's fantastic. 30-day risk-free guarantee. Save $800 a month per family on average. That's pound 250 and say Dennis Prager. A lot of people are doing it for very good reason. What was the latest? That you have to wear a mask indoors? Is that what?
You don't have to.
I mean, he's telling you you're encouraged to wear a mask indoors. How can we further ruin the quality of people's lives? He was caught, by the way, in, was it Massachusetts? He was vacationing.
Yeah,
Nantucket. And he wasn't wearing a mask. See, the question of whether they believe what they say is an interesting question, but only God can answer it. But I've always said the Gavin Newsom sighting in the middle of the lockdown and closing of restaurants, many of which never recovered, and he's sitting there with his buddies at his $1,000 meal without a mask on, it doesn't make him a hypocrite. Of course he's a hypocrite, but that doesn't mean anything. At bottom, they don't believe it. They believe it's good for you, you sucker, who believe Newsom and Fauci and Biden. You're a sucker if you believe them. And you've decided to be one. That's what's so amazing. That's what's so depressing to me. You have decided to believe nonsense, to scare your life and scare your children and deprive your children of friends and deprive your children of play and deprive your children of school. You made those decisions. I have to ask my fellow Americans, was this not serious enough for you to read about? Are people like me, do we want to die? Do we want our families to die? Why do we think differently? I'll tell you why. Because we know more. That's why. And you didn't want to know more. This is addressed to my fellow Americans. You never heard of the epidemiologists, of whom there are so many. How many Americans know of the Great Barrington Declaration against the lockdown and everything that we have done? Everything we did is wrong. Everything. More people died this year. Everything is wrong. And they repeat what's wrong. Lock down. Don't go out. Kill your friend's store and business. Destroy, destroy, destroy. Keep Target open. Yes, that's the key. Keep Walmart open. Keep CVS open. But shut down the little guy selling the same stuff. How do you possibly morally justify that? How do you health-wise justify that? I can go to Walmart, but not Fred's hardware store. That's what I was looking for, hardware. The callousness towards our fellow Americans that has been illustrated this year. You think you're callous. People are callous for not getting vaccines. People are callous for not allowing people to have a livelihood. Are all these nurses who don't take the vaccine, are they all out of their minds? How many nurses would take a vaccine if it had not been forced upon them? How many pilots? How many people in the Army? You can get people to do a lot of things if you force them to. You have no livelihood. You're dishonorably, or you're better, more precise, you're discharged without an honorable discharge. Probably the finest of our people in the armed forces were the ones who resist the tyranny of all of this. It's hard to believe that I'm saying this thing. This is, what is today's date? 29th of November. We're entering the last month of 2021, and I'm still talking about this. Omicron. How'd they come up with that name? So wait, they skipped she. Yeah, XI. Did you know that, folks? They skipped that letter in the Greek alphabet because it's the name of the Stalin-like leader of Lenin-like. How's that? Of China, creating a totalitarian universe and proclaiming his desire to invade another country, specifically Taiwan. Yes, wow. They won't sell New Zealand. You know where I got, this is the first time I think I've ever cited Al Jazeera. Had a good article on New Zealand tourism. When New Zealand this week finally announced plans for the return of international visitors, Eve Lawrence, general manager of Haka Tourism Group in Auckland, could find little reason to celebrate. After nearly 2 years of border closures that have reduced business to a trickle, Lawrence will have to wait at least another 5 months before welcoming customers from overseas. Even then, tourists will have to self-isolate at home for 7 days. A requirement believes will dissuade many from coming at all. Many? How about virtually all? Lawrence said her company, whose revenues have plummeted about 95% during the pandemic, was now bracing for potentially the most difficult 6 months of business yet. Everybody praises New Zealand. Look at how few people died. It's an island nation, ladies and gentlemen. If you shut down an island nation, you can achieve a lot. That's true. Is that the remedy? No, it isn't.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Last night, the New York Times ran a headline, Social Spending Infrastructure Advances in-House. And I thought to myself, when did socialism go from big government to social spending infrastructure? Social spending infrastructure doesn't mean anything. It's never been a term of art. It doesn't have any meaning. It's a cover term for a vast hose of money on everything. This isn't going to get through the Senate, is it?
Oh, no, I don't think this is going to get through the Senate. And the infrastructure bill got through, but that's going to be about it on these big spending programs. And Pelosi and her crew want $4 trillion in spending. And, of course, I get it. Pelosi wants to pass this thing so that she can be an ambassador and head to Rome. What they're trying to do is cast one vote. And in that one vote, they want to take control of your kids, control of education, control of your health care, federalizing elections, changing immigration policy, then more provisions of the Green New Deal and a socialist economy.
Are you telling me that Speaker Pelosi, we're gonna visit her on the Pope? Is that what you're telling me?
We're hearing that is the goal. I don't talk to her, but what we're hearing is that she is looking forward to becoming an ambassador.
Now, look, Francis and I don't agree on much, but he is that we cannot do that to the Pope.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Man, I miss my father, and I want him to be here with me, but he's not.
We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Sorry, Cyber Monday. You can get something that changes lives, has for decades now. My entire teaching of the first 5 books of the Bible. Dennis teaches the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The lectures that I gave that preceded my writing my commentary. By the way, they're completely different. The listening and the writing even amazes me how different they are, and they are virtually entirely different. And it's powerful stuff. You can get it on MP3, get on CD or on a flash drive for $499. That's 50% off.
There's only 100 CD.
And there are only 100 collections available.
100 CD collections available. The CD part, there are 3 options. CD collection, there's only 100.
Okay, for whatever reason, I didn't understand what my producer told me. It doesn't matter. They're all $499. The CD, the MP3, and the USB flash drive.
There's only 100 CD collections.
There's only 100 CD collections.
Right.
Oh, now I understand. That was perfect in one sentence. Okay. That's true. There are only 100 of the CD collections. But obviously, I presume, unlimited MP3.
Yes.
Oh, you got a player as well. Mm-hmm. Wow. You get a player for MP3 and the thing. Anyway, it's life-changing. We need this stuff more than ever. My religious life has kept me sane the entire time, not only my whole life, but the last 2 years. Okay, anyway, that's all available. Where do people go? Dennis Prager Store?
Dennis Prager Store, DennisPrager.com.
DennisPrager.com, Dennis Prager Store. This is huge. 1 day a year. That's what you should spend money on, good stuff. Okay. To Vera in Torrance, the man who wrote the article on Rittenhouse was Bruce Bauer, B-A-W-E-R. Okay, so I answered that one. This is the next issue. I'm going to go back to the hysteria of the world in the next hour, but I'm going to talk to you now about the Salvation Army. I used to passionately raise money for the Salvation Army every year for year after year, Christmas time. I was honored by the Salvation Army as one of the biggest fundraisers. Salvation Army has been ruined by the left, as everything else it touches. The head of the Salvation Army must resign, or I will, among others, work relentlessly to reveal the sickness at the heart of the material circulated in the Salvation Army. It's become another woke crap house. Get it? Crapping on the United States in the name of Christ. How's that? That's called, you know what the Salvation Army leadership is doing? They are violating the third commandment, do not take the name of the Lord in vain. They are advocating sickness in the name of Christ. That's pretty low, folks. That's pretty scummy. And I will continue this attack because I read their defense, which is a gigantic lie. It's propaganda lie from a place I loved. They attack those of us who are revealing what the Salvation Army has come to as having an agenda. We who collected and put our names and were honored by you have an agenda? You're damn right we do. To help the poor and defend this country and not crap on it in the name of Christ. There is no possible penitence for the Salvation Army while its heads continue in their position. They must all resign in shame. They have disgraced a beautiful organization. That's why I'm so angry. They have disgraced. By the way, the violation for that law, taking God's name in vain, it's the only one God says in the Ten Commandments he will not forgive. I will read to you the Salvation Army defense. Oh my God. Oh my, it was probably written by some woke professors of gender theory at a university. I loved the Salvation Army. I loved it. I put my heart out every year, and so did you. I raised more funds than, to the best of my knowledge, anyone in radio. And now look what's happened. If you're white, check your privilege. More on that. ReliefFactor.com, 800-500-8384. That's the number to order Relief Factor. And the Relief Factor relieves you of joint and muscle pain. It is a miracle supplement. It is, I don't know what the word completely safe is. I don't want to be liable. It's so safe. I don't think there's a limitation on the amount of time you could take it. Try it for 3 weeks because they say you'll know in 3 weeks. If it doesn't work in 3 weeks, probably won't work. They say that. $19.95, ReliefFactor.com.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Last night, the New York Times ran a headline, Social Spending Infrastructure Advances in-House. And I thought to myself, when did socialism go from big government to social spending infrastructure? Social spending infrastructure doesn't mean anything. It's never been a term of art. It doesn't have any meaning. It's a cover term for a vast hose of money on everything. This isn't going to get through the Senate, is it?
Oh, no, I don't think this is going to get through the Senate. And the infrastructure bill got through, but that's going to be about it on these big spending programs. And Pelosi and her crew want $4 trillion in spending. And, of course, I get it. Pelosi wants to pass this thing so that she can be an ambassador and head to Rome. What they're trying to do is cast one vote. And in that one vote, they want to take control of your kids, control of education, control of your health care, federalizing elections, changing immigration policy, then more provisions of the Green New Deal and a socialist economy.
Are you telling me that Speaker Pelosi, we're gonna visit her on the Pope? Is that what you're telling me?
We're hearing that is the goal. I don't talk to her, but what we're hearing is that she is looking forward to becoming an ambassador.
Now, look, Francis and I don't agree on much, but we cannot do that to the Pope.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Okay, y'all. Dennis Prager here, talking to you about the Salvation Army. So they put out a study guide on racism. Let's talk about racism. 2 internal Salvation Army documents. In the Let's Talk About Racism document, the Salvation Army implores white donors to, quote, lament, repent, and apologize for biases or racist ideologies held and actions committed, and urges them to adopt a posture of anti-racism. In the absence of making anti-racist choice, we unconsciously uphold aspects of white supremacy, white dominant culture, and unequal institutions and society, the document states. In the guide, the Salvation Army makes use of a litany of woke terms to articulate their message, including anti-racist, colonizer, domestic terrorism, fascism, institutional racism, microaggression, systemic racism, and whiteness. So they issued a statement. I would read to you from their statement so that I be fair to the Salvation Army, which I once loved, and raised not fortunes, but a large amount of money for. The Salvation Army's response to false claims on the topic of racism. Okay, I'm reading to you from their response. Some individuals and groups have recently attempted to mislabel our organization to serve their own agendas. So you know already that the leadership of the Salvation Army are liars, are unworthy of being leaders of the Salvation Army. I will continue to attack as long as they're in office, unless they publicly repent. I mean seriously repent. I'm a believer in repentance. What are our agendas? I'm one of those who have mislabeled. You issue this and we've mislabeled, so that's a lie. And second, to serve their own agendas. What's our agenda? I thought our agenda was to raise funds for the Salvation Army. It shows you how this man has been taken over, or whoever wrote this has been taken over by the left. This is leftist doublespeak. Greg Kokel has an agenda other than serving Christ. The man's one of the leading Christian thinkers in the country. He was one of those who wrote about this. And he loves the Salvation Army like I do. Agendas? What are our agendas? How about our agendas are not to be racist in the name of Christ? That's our agenda. They have claimed that we believe our donors should apologize for their skin color, that the Salvation Army believes America is an inherently racist society, and that we have abandoned our Christian faith for one ideology or another. Those claims are simply false. Really? Did I not read from this document? Did you not publish it? The truth is, the Salvation Army believes that racism is fundamentally incompatible with Christianity. Notice he didn't say, did you see the sleight of hand? It's an amazing thing. The claims are false. And then the next sentence, what is the truth? The Salvation Army is against racism. Get it? You get it? Does anybody fall for this? The left claims they don't believe in racism too. What is the point? It has nothing to do with the charge. The charge is you said whites are racist. That America is fundamentally, systemically racist. So the truth is you're against racism? You haven't responded to the charge. Racism is fundamentally incompatible with Christianity. That's correct. And then we are called, but it has nothing to do with the charges against the Salvation Army. We are called by God to work toward a world where all people are loved, accepted, and valued. What does that mean? All right, doesn't matter. Our positional statement on racism makes this clear. These beliefs and goals are critically important because we know that racism exists, and we are determined to do everything the Bible asks of us to overcome it. So he's basically saying, yeah, we issued that thing because there's so much racism in America. The Salvation Army occasionally publishes internal study guides on various complex topics to help foster positive conversations and grace-filled reflection among Salvationists. Oh, really? Did you publish Larry Elder? Or did you only publish the thoughts of Ibram X. Kendi and the like, whether in his name or not? By openly discussing these issues, we always hope to encourage the development of a more thoughtful organization that is better positioned to support those in need. But no one is being told how to think, period. Oh, really? Then do you have both sides on the issue published internally? God, is it depressing. Who'd have thought, right? Who'd have thought the Salvation Army? Microaggressions, colonizer, systemic racism, anti-racist colonizer, fascism, whiteness. Wow. So here's an interesting question. Even if the leadership of the Salvation Army is stupid, doesn't take brilliance to understand by issuing this, your entire base of support is spit in the face. Did nobody at Salvation Army headquarters raise the issue? You know, the vast majority of people who support us are not leftists. Why would we do this? Just from the standpoint of helping the poor because we need to raise money. Unless they're being supported either by folks who are conservative, who don't know what they've done, or by some organizations on the left. I don't know. If you'd have told me 3 years ago I would not raise a cent for the Salvation Army on the radio, and that I would attack the Salvation Army, I would have thought you were smoking weed. We'll continue.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The recent war on history threatens to erase America's past. The Pilgrims, hailed by Movie Guide as inspiring, combats the lies to reveal America's true history.
They were poor. They were outcasts. They were enemies of the state for their refusal to submit to the Church of England.
The Mayflower was a cargo ship, but the most precious cargo that was carried across the Atlantic were the ideas in the hearts of the Pilgrims that were drawn from the Bible. The idea of self-government and rule from within. All these are within that body of Pilgrims.
The Pilgrims founded America for all intents and purposes.
Find out what everyone is talking about. Watch this new documentary to see God's providence in the lives of the Pilgrims.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Sadness about the Salvation Army here. Daniel in Minnesota, hello.
Oh, hi, Dennis. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I just wanted to make sure I understood correctly. I believe that what you were just quoting now, that was not from the Salvation Army International Positional Statement on Racism. That was actually from their withdrawal guide where it says that they withdrew their controversial guide amid backlash from donors.
No, I quoted from two things. One, their woke guide to America as racist and whites is garbage, and the response to the attacks on the Salvation Army for publishing that book. I wanted to be fair and accurate. I used the Salvation Army's own words of defense.
Right. Yeah, no, it's crazy because, after reading where you left off, where saying, but no one is being told how to think, period, and then they say a few paragraphs later, continue, we've done our best to provide accurate info, but unfortunately some have chosen to ignore those efforts, and then consequently for both, I just skipped the sentence there, consequently for both reasons, the International Social Justice Commission has now withdrawn the guide for appropriate review.
Yeah, appropriate review, right. There's no apology, there's no resignation. The left has succeeded in ruining another organization. Remember, my friends, Everything the left touches, it destroys. And one of the few things I thought was impervious, you have no idea, well, you do, many of you do, the left's poisoning of Christianity and Judaism has been Catholicism, Protestantism, and Judaism. Interestingly, Islam has been sort of impervious to leftist influence, partially because the left has spent its time defending Islam. But if the rot has gotten as far as the Salvation Army gives you an idea, it is an amazing thing for me as a religious person who takes this stuff really seriously. It really boils down to in a large extent, do you fear man or do you fear God? So the leadership of the Salvation Army has chosen to fear man. So you do, I ask often, and it's not bitter, it's just a question. How many truly religious people are there? And I don't mean perfect. Just like fearing God first. That's pretty basic to a Christian or Jewish life.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
And that's why religious people are far more patriotic, frankly, about the Constitution, because they don't believe those rights were given to them by the state, but rather by something larger. And in Europe, I don't think that people believe that. They used to turn to monarchies, then they turned to fascism and communism, at least in the last 100 or more years, and it doesn't seem to work. And now they're just turning towards the European Union and bureaucrats to sort of guide them as their new priests.
One of the reasons I am always curious about why Europe went this way, but why America admires it, how come we got this disease when it's clearly not working? And I think the answer is in what I call the semester abroad disease. It's like mad cow disease. If you spend a semester abroad when you're 21, you have a wonderful time. You eat well, you have a party for 6 months, and then you come home and you extrapolate from that everything must be like being a student in Europe for 6 months when there's nothing at all to do with an American having fun in Europe for 6 months. David, this all started to rise in the United States when we started to ship our college students away for a semester in Florence. And then they come back and they think, wow, Europe is great.
That as well, I had thought about that, but also just tourism, right? I mean, when we go to Europe, it's beautiful. When people go to Hungary, they sit by the river, the Danube, and sip coffee. But in the real world, about a mile out of the city, things aren't that way. The American home, I think on average, I might be wrong about this, but it's close. It's about 1,000 square feet bigger than the average European home. We live in mansions in our suburbs that most Europeans would not be able to comprehend.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Creeps who've had some financial success in life. We're the bad. We need to be punished. Although not Pelosi. Did you hear she pushed back on the capital gains tax increase? She didn't like that, and she's a wealthy woman. But anyway, it turns out the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center has taken a look at Build Back Better. They're saying about 30% of middle-income households will be taxed and pay additional taxes, have a tax increase in 2022. Whoops! No, say it isn't so, Joe. Say it isn't so. Come on.
Come on, man.
Did you lie to us again? Did you not tell the truth? And some low and middle class and middle income households, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, which has reviewed Build Back Better, they will pay more per year in taxes if the plan is implemented. You know, obviously they sat around the White House, they said, let's try this. Let's say that this massive spending won't cost anything. You know, it'll be a little bit like Biden calling Satchel Paige a Negro, and then we'll say he didn't call Satchel Paige a Negro. We'll see if they buy it. It doesn't cost a thing. It's free. Just like free college is really free. Wink, wink. Bunch of liars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
But as I said, had they not acquitted him in this vile prosecution from a vile prosecutor, it would have ended, to a very large extent, the whole notion of self-defense in the United States of America. The service this jury performed cannot be overstated. Absolutely cannot be overstated. Yes, you can shoot people who are out to shoot you. This is about as elementary a moral ideal as exists in the human race. And that's what this young man did.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Then we are going to bring in innovative charter schools. Most people don't know that public charter schools are public schools, and so they fight against it. They worship the building instead of the child, and we're not going to just keep throwing money at that. In fact, I put in a charter school bill 20 years ago when I was first in office, but we were stopped.
Now, you know, let's pause there for a moment, Lieutenant Governor-elect Sears. The appointments of the Secretary of Education and the Superintendent of Education are, I think, the two most important that Governor Youngkin, when he becomes Governor Youngkin, makes. Have you counseled with him on who those individuals ought to be and what their orientation ought to be towards charter schools?
Well, Governor-elect Youngkin, oh boy, do I love saying that. Governor-elect Youngkin has promised us he's going to fire the current superintendent. Day one, fire this current superintendent. Now, I believe he's going to have at least two appointments almost immediately on the board because, you know, they roll off.
Yes.
But the board has been stacked now for the past, but we can't really get rid of the policies that we have unless we get rid of some of the laws that we have, you see, because what they're doing is implementing the laws, which is why we needed the House, because we've got to bring back some of that and get rid of it, for example, CRT. And, you know, unfortunately, this left-wing media has been gaslighting us to let us know that, well, there is no such thing as CRT, when we have seen with our own eyes that back in 2015, the Virginia State Board of Education put it on their website and put books recommending the reading of such and the teaching of such.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Really do. Hope you got together with people. I wish I were a fly on the wall in about 100 American homes. Love to know what people talked about. So there's a new one, Omicron. I'll tell you that you have to look at the bright side of things. I try to find a silver lining wherever possible, so I now know one. Many Americans not familiar with the Greek alphabet will now know many letters of the Greek alphabet, aside from fraternity names. I mean, if you know, right? If you know, Delta Kappa Daga, Epsilon Delta Phi, Hi Phi, Phi Beta Kappa, and now Delta Omicron. This is awesome. Here is a tough one, though. Now, that was the silver lining. Now, here's the dark side. What if they run out of Greek letters? At the rate we're going. Hebrew, that's right, exactly. That's such a great point. Never thought of that. The Gimel variant. Oh. You know, by the way, I am amazed that the Association of Greek Progressives has not come out against naming viruses after the Greek alphabet. If that is not anti-Greek, what is? Shocking. We need an awakening, a woke awakening among Greek Americans. So on this latest one, which has now captivated the world's interest, the South African doctor who first alerted the scientific community to a new SARS-CoV-2 B.1.1529, which the World Health Organization has dubbed Omicron, has described symptoms of the variant as unusual but mild. And for that, there are no flights to or from South Africa, country that can ill afford a collapse of its tourist industry. So what? Let's see, the U.S. has, right, stopped flights, correct? Israel has stopped flights.
Yeah, there are other African countries too.
Other African countries have stopped flights. Sub-Saharan Africa?
Two countries in Sub-Saharan.
Really? What countries?
Botswana, Namibia.
Wait, from Botswana, or Botswana has cut flights to South Africa? Well, Botswana is so close to South Africa. All right. President Joe Biden responded to the emergence of the variant by enacting a travel ban on 8 African nations. The European Union quickly followed suit. This is my favorite. This is actually, I'm not kidding, had I read it in Babylon Bee, I would have cracked up. Let's see. Kathy Hochul even enacted a state of emergency in New York to respond to the Omicron variant, despite the U.S. not having confirmed a single case of the new variant. But she'll say it could come here. There's a state of emergency in New York based on a virus that has not reached New York and which is described by the discoverer of the virus as mild. She's very impressive, by the way, I got to say. You know, I never thought I would think this. I'm starting to get nostalgic for Cuomo. I got my producer to laugh, which is very rare. It's so rare, it's sort of like the sighting of a bald eagle. Or even better, of a dodo. What is a dodo? Is that a bird? And that's dead. That's why I say deader than the dodo. Sean sighted a dodo the other day, driving in the left lane with a mask. Exactly. Dr. Angelique Coetzee told the Telegraph she first suspected a new variant of COVID-19 was spreading when her medical practice in Pretoria saw an influx of patients with, quote, symptoms that did not make immediate sense. Coetzee, who also serves as the chairwoman of the South African Medical Association, explained those symptoms included intense fatigue and a high pulse rate in younger patients, but not the loss of smell or taste, the hallmark symptom, I'm reading from the Blaze, of COVID-19. Coetzee has also explained of the new variant, quote, it represents mild disease with symptoms having sore muscles and tiredness for a day or two, not feeling well. So far, we have detected that those infected do not suffer loss of taste or smell. They might have a slight cough. There are no prominent symptoms of those infected. Some are currently being treated at home. According to the Telegraph, Coetzee made clear in a briefing to other African medical organizations that, quote, her patients were all healthy. And our real concern was for older people and those with comorbidities. Well, it's true for any disease. So what are we talking about? Why does the President of the United States address this issue? Why is there a state of emergency in New York State? Because it's governed by a Democrat. And a Democrat female. So it's a combination of factors, because females are disproportionately on the left and are disproportionately of the belief, better safe than sorry. Better safe than sorry. That is what it is. What is the thinking of a Hochul in calling a state of emergency in New York State? I think it is to show New Yorkers and America how on top of things she is, how seriously she takes this stuff. Because you pay no price in this country for suppressing people's liberties. You don't. You pay no price. Newsom, there was a recall and nothing happened. That's the reason. It's all upside for her. If nothing happens with Omicron, which is likely the case, so look, I was there. I took care of New Yorkers. Is she going to lose one vote because of that? That's the point. People have stopped valuing liberty because it depends in the name of what. There's always a name. In the Soviet Union, people lost liberty in the name of social justice, in the name of equity, which are the cornerstones of leftism. But in Germany, they lost it in the name of the fatherland, and in the West now, and in fact throughout the world, in the name of health. How many years have I been saying on this show? You listen to this show regularly, I think you'll understand a lot about life. And how many years have I been saying health über alles? Right? Has that not been one of my code words or themes? Health above all. I got this phrase from Deutschland über alles. Germany is above all. And this is what it is. Health above all. 1-8 Prager 776 877 243 7776. I'd like to repeat. It's the first time in medical history, modern medical history, that people have not sought, suppressed remedies for a disease. Everything has been vaccine. Nothing has been therapy. It's the first time in American history that doctors have been told what they can or cannot prescribe. It's not between you and your patient. It's between you and the CDC and the state. It's mind-blowing. And yet, no price is paid. And now time for good news. And I'm not being sarcastic. Michelle Goldberg, another simpleton at the New York Times. Why do I call her a simpleton? I don't know her. She may be the sweetest woman. Because I could write their articles. Global warming, racism. Gee, did we talk about global warming? Oh, back to racism. Okay, that's what they write about. They basically have nothing else to say. So she wrote an article about how wrong it is for all these Americans to now protest what's being taught to their kids in school, CRT, critical race theory, and so on. This is all right-wing drivel. So I read the comments to articles almost all the time. Guess what? Comment after comment, the most popular comments in the New York Times, said she's out of her mind. They really are teaching CRT to our kids.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Last night, the New York Times ran a headline, Social Spending Infrastructure Advances in-House. And I thought to myself, when did socialism go from big government to social spending infrastructure? Social spending infrastructure doesn't mean anything. It's never been a term of art. It doesn't have any meaning. It's a cover term for a vast hose of money on everything. This isn't going to get through the Senate, is it?
Oh, no, I don't think this is going to get through the Senate. And the infrastructure bill got through, but that's going to be about it on these big spending programs. And Pelosi and her crew want $4 trillion in spending. And, of course, I get it. Pelosi wants to pass this thing so that she can be an ambassador and head to Rome. What they're trying to do is cast one vote. And in that one vote, they want to take control of your kids, control of education, control of your health care, federalizing elections, changing immigration policy, then more provisions of the Green New Deal and a socialist economy.
Are you telling me that Speaker Pelosi, we're gonna visit her on the Pope? Is that what you're telling me?
We're hearing that is the goal. I don't talk to her, but what we're hearing is that she is looking forward to becoming an ambassador.
Now, look, Francis and I don't agree on much, but we cannot do that to the Pope.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you. You gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Man, I miss my father. And I want him to be here with me, but he's not.
We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hey everybody, I'm Dennis Prager, and I'd like you to know it's Cyber Monday, and it is the one time of the year, to the best of my knowledge, the Prager store makes my Torah commentaries, not the written ones, the original audio, many, 100, 200 hours, I don't know the number, of my teaching the first books of the Bible. You can get it on MP3 with a player, you can get it on a flash drive, and you can get it, there are only 100 left, because they don't make CDs of it anymore, if you want CDs. It's at half off only today at the Prager store. I promise you it will rivet you, and I believe it will profoundly affect your life. This is me teaching the Torah to people of every background. And again, it's at the Prager store or at DennisPrager.com. Today only, 50% off. It's so interesting. It's related to what I just said, but it's not about it specifically. How people choose to spend their money is such an interesting question. I've noted when talking about my own life, I was always enthralled by books. I have, about 7,000 books. And I love books. I love reading. I love learning. When I was starting in high school and certainly in college, for much of my life, I was okay in the sense that, I didn't have to worry about lunch money. But I never made what I made subsequently in my later years. I'm very grateful for that, for what I earned. But I didn't much of my life, and certainly not in college and when I was in my 20s. But I always bought books because I thought, if there's one life-enhancing idea in that book, just one, isn't that worth, then $10 or $20? That's how I looked at it. Anyway, it was a good attitude. That's all I'm saying. All right. Again, Prager store, DennisPrager.com. There is an amazing development, I think, taking place. I think a lot of liberals are starting to understand the viciousness of the left. Just starting. And by the way, they'll still vote Democrat. That's the amazing thing. But maybe some will change. I think some may have changed, or at least independents are. So Michelle Goldberg, New York Times columnist, wrote a piece defending the schools and the sick stuff that schools give your kids about race and America. So I wanted to see the comments, and I always click on popularity. What were the most popular comments? And they're all New York Times readers, remember. What were the most every single one of the most popular attacked Michelle Goldberg. Listen, I'm going to read some. Democrats here, this is the one that got 771 recommended clicks. The most popular comment in the New York Times on their left-wing, well, they're all left-wing except for three of them. Democrats need to do more than get schools back to normal. They need to apologize for their mistake of keeping schools closed as long as they did. In other words, the article was about schools and her defense of schools. Rural school, listen to this, the most popular comment in the New York Times on this article. Rural schools, Republican area schools, and Catholic schools all reopened for more in-person days than blue school districts, and showed it could be done with small budgets. Wow. Did you hear that? This is a first. The most popular comment on a New York Times left-wing piece praises Republicans and Catholics. Rural schools? Wow. Women in blue cities and suburbs were forced out of their jobs in droves, and their kids' mental health cratered. Is it any wonder these voters are abandoning Democrats? Democrats chose labor unions over kids. I got the chills reading this to you. The most popular comment in the New York Times on another left-wing piece by one of their 30 or so left-wing commentators. Democrats chose labor unions over kids? If this is happening to New York Times readers, it helps explain Virginia. And other districts. What was in there? San Antonio area district where it was all blue and a Democrat won? I mean, it happened almost everywhere. In New Jersey, they almost lost the governorship. They need to promise never to do it again, or Republicans will keep making inroads into parent voters. The second most popular comment: California is thinking about banning calculus in high school. The reason? Black and brown students are not equally represented in calculus. Zero evidence of discrimination. More and more middle schools no longer permit differentiated instruction in math. Some kids can't act or subtract, while others, through talent and effort, are ready for algebra in the second grade, algebra 2 in 7th grade. Parents are increasingly angry, and it is not because they are racists. Elementary schools are not teaching university-level CRT, but public schools are claiming that a lack of equal outcomes is proof of discrimination. Schools no longer have consequences for failing to complete work, showing up late for class, or disrupting classes. The students most negatively impacted are poor students of all races who cannot get out. The left is destroying the Democratic Party. Second most popular comment on a Michelle Goldberg defense of schools. Here's a question, one of the 10 questions I would most like answered. Did Michelle Goldberg read comments on her article? By the way, I have to say to all who publish, you are making a big mistake not reading comments on your piece. You can learn from them. You can even learn from the vicious ones. Gee, what got people angry? Maybe I'll repeat it. Whatever it might be, I don't understand not taking 15 minutes to read comments on an article you wrote. I think it's sort of arrogant, to be honest. But anyway, how's that, huh? The left is destroying the Democratic Party. Second most popular comment, New York Times.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
And that's why religious people are far more patriotic, frankly, about the Constitution, because they don't believe those rights were given to them by the state, but rather by something larger. And in Europe, I don't think that people believe that. They used to turn to monarchies, then they turned to fascism and communism, at least in the last 100 or more years, and it doesn't seem to work. And now they're just turning towards the European Union and bureaucrats to sort of guide them as their new priests.
One of the reasons I am always curious about why Europe went this way, but why America admires it, how come we got this disease when it's clearly not working? And I think the answer is in what I call the semester abroad disease. It's like mad cow disease. If you spend a semester abroad when you're 21, you have a wonderful time. You eat well, you have a party for 6 months, and then you come home and you extrapolate from that everything must be like being a student in Europe for 6 months when there's nothing at all to do with an American having fun in Europe for 6 months. David, this all started to rise in the United States when we started to ship our college students away for a semester in Florence. And then they come back and they think, wow, Europe is great.
That as well, I had thought about that, but also just tourism, right? I mean, when we go to Europe, it's beautiful. When people go to Hungary, they sit by the river, the Danube, and sip coffee. But in the real world, about a mile out of the city, things aren't that way. The American home, I think on average, I might be wrong about this, but it's close. It's about 1,000 square feet bigger than the average European home. We live in mansions in our suburbs that most Europeans would not be able to comprehend.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Creeps who've had some financial success in life. We're the bad. We need to be punished. Although not Pelosi. Did you hear she pushed back on the capital gains tax increase? She didn't like that, and she's a wealthy woman. But anyway, it turns out the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center has taken a look at Build Back Better. They're saying about 30% of middle-income households will be taxed and pay additional taxes, have a tax increase in 2022. Whoops! No, say it isn't so, Joe. Say it isn't so. Come on.
Come on, man.
Did you lie to us again? Did you not tell the truth? And some low and middle class and middle income households, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, which has reviewed Build Back Better, they will pay more per year in taxes if the plan is implemented. You know, obviously they sat around the White House, they said, let's try this. Let's say that this massive spending won't cost anything. You know, it'll be a little bit like Biden calling Satchel Paige a Negro, and then we'll say he didn't call Satchel Paige a Negro. We'll see if they buy it. It doesn't cost a thing. It's free. Just like free college is really free. Wink, wink. Bunch of liars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager. I'm going to continue with some of the comments of New York Times readers. It actually does give me hope, and I never do false hope. You know that. You know when I think things are going bad. But that series of comments attacking, you would have thought that what I read was from conservatives. The attacks on Michelle Goldberg in the New York Times. The left is destroying the Democratic Party. Wow. That's their words. I have in studio Aryeh Leifert. He is a tour guide. He is also a rabbi. He knows Israel and he knows the Bible better than I know Brooklyn. And I grew up in Brooklyn. No, it's amazing. But you don't know this, folks. To be a tour guide in Israel, you have to go through basically like a doctoral course. You know. So what happened 400 feet northeast of Ashkelon? You know, that's the sort of, they're amazing. And he's in the United States because he was just the, what was it, clergyman? I don't know. Is that it? The clergyman?
Chaplain.
Chaplain. On board a cruise. So he's in the Southern California area. I know this man for years. He's a remarkable man. His company is Israel Insider Tours. Should you go to Israel and want a terrific guide and company, Israel Insider Tours. So I want to talk to you about what's gone on in Israel. I need to tell you, I've told my audience, and I know you listen to the show, so you know, my two favorite places, America and Israel, have profoundly disappointed me in the last 2 years. Both panic-stricken. How do you explain Israel? Do Israelis think, look, to save a life, liberty and the ability to make a living and go to school don't matter? How do you explain Israel's panic reaction?
All right. So first of all, Dennis, good morning, and thank you very much for having me. Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas as well, from one American to another. So the way I explain it is the way that was explained to me by an Israeli friend. He said that in Israel, we very often have a military mindset of following orders. And I think that many Israelis see this as a military situation. It's a national security situation, whether correctly or incorrectly, but that's how they see it. And we don't question orders. The government says, jump, we say, how high.
That is interesting. And it's worked until now.
It's absolutely worked. I posted on Facebook a few months ago a question from my fellow Israelis. To what extent will you accept these draconian restrictions? And more than a few people said, the government is doing this for our benefit. It's difficult, but we need to follow what they say.
So I'm curious. I'm going to ask my producer for a second. Would you say most Americans have the same attitude? Or it's a different mindset here that is allowed for it? All right, we'll talk about that another time. So has Israel been, unlike even Austria, protest-free?
I don't recall seeing any major protests in the streets, not even on social media, a virtual protest. The biggest protest that I've seen was the protest that I did myself a few weeks ago in a supermarket where I just refused to wear a mask the entire time.
In an Israeli supermarket?
Yes, in an Israeli supermarket.
And what happened?
And the guard, when I went in, of course this conversation is going on in Hebrew, he said, sir, you need a mask. And I turned to him and I said, I'm sorry, I am done with masks. The look on his face indicated he had never received a response like that.
I understand.
He was in shock. He was in absolute shock.
Yes.
He repeated it, and I repeated to him, I'm sorry, I'm done with masks. And then the manager, when I was checking out, told me, you can't do this, as I'm swiping my my groceries. And I'm thinking the whole time, well, actually I can, because I'm doing it right now. And the feeling of liberation, it was sort of a mini exodus for me. The feeling of liberation.
By the way, I have another answer for you. Why aren't you wearing a mask? It's not Purim. I think it's another possibility.
Very good, yes.
Aryeh Leifert's company, Inside Israel, Israel Insider Tours. IsraelInsiderTours.com. He's magnificent. It's up at DennisPrager.com. Nerve Renew is an interesting product. If you have tingling, numbness, etc. on your hands or feet, extremities as they're called, as I have had nearly all of my life in my feet, then I want you to try Nerve Renew. Here's my story in a nutshell. I had special inserts made about 10 years ago. They worked magnificently while I wore my shoes. Then I read about Nerve Renew, started taking it. 8 months later, I threw away the inserts. I am not wearing them now. I have not worn them once since I've tried it. Give it a try. 2 weeks free trial and a 1-year money-back guarantee. Try NerveRenew.com. Try NerveRenew.com.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
And also, the bill would create more than 150 new government programs at a time when the government can't even manage the programs it has on the books. It's absolutely insane. I am imploring my colleagues in swing districts, so-called blue dog Democrats, moderate Democrats, if for no other reason than I'm appealing to their own political survival instincts, walk away from this bill before it's too late. This is an incredible act of hubris on the part of the Democrats right now, and it is bad for America.
So BBB is $2 billion for tree equity, doubling the size of the IRS. And what's the third takeaway? Because you got to define a bill by its most absurd provisions. And so we've got doubling the IRS size, tree equity. What's number 3?
I think the Civilian Climate Corps is a great encapsulation.
I think you're right. And there are really 300,000 people in that?
That's what's been estimated. This is AOC's signature provision. She wants a bunch of unemployed baristas to become government-paid civilian activists running around the country doing God knows what at the taxpayer.
I mean, is it outlined? Did they tell us what the Civilian Conservation Corps is going to do?
Not in any detailed or meaningful sense. And because we haven't had a meaningful committee process, no one's even able to ask basic questions in a public setting and demand answers from, let's say, the executive branch agencies that would be in charge of overseeing these brand new programs. So the whole
That
thing
was
is
my next question. Who gets to oversee the tree equity money?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you. You gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I would never have predicted that Americans or Israelis would be so docile as they watch the economies of their countries shattered, people losing their businesses, kids not going to school for no good reason. NGR, no good reason. So it's interesting to discuss this. An American who made Aliyah, which means moved to Israel. How long ago did you do that?
12 years ago.
12 years
Very
ago.
easy date. 090909.
Is that right?
Yep.
999?
Very convenient.
It certainly is. And of course, he's fluent in Hebrew. He runs a magnificent tour company, Israel Insider Tours, and it's up at Dennis Prager. And we're very happy to mention that to you because he's a quality man and a quality company. But tourism in Israel, how big is tourism to Israel's economy?
Tremendous. I don't know the exact percentage, but so many people rely on tourism, whether bus drivers, whether shopkeepers. So much of the economy depends on foreigners.
And it's the little guy.
Correct.
I mean, big tech companies in Israel are doing fine, just like big tech in America is doing fine. But I mean, I'm just thinking, so everybody employed in the hotel industry.
Correct.
Everybody, buses, drivers.
Yep.
Tour guides.
Gift shops. Yep. And the small mom and pop stores
and the restaurants
or services that people.
Why do all the waiters know English?
Right.
Because there's so many tourists there.
Right. I was speaking to some of our drivers recently. They're thinking of going into other industries. They can't wait forever. They literally live group to group.
This Omicron has to be the final straw. New York State, this crackpot governor of New York State, has declared a state of emergency over a virus that has not even reached the United States and which they say in South Africa is mild. And Israel has done the same thing. Israel's going to another lockdown, correct?
We are closed as of 2 days ago to foreigners for at least 2 weeks. They say 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. They said 2 weeks in the beginning.
Right. Two weeks to flatten the curve. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Right.
By the way, it's worth noting this is not the Netanyahu government.
Right.
It's not Netanyahu. It's not Bennett. It's Israel.
Right. Very frustrating.
So what are your colleagues doing who are in your business?
So some of them are actively looking for jobs outside the tourism industry, unfortunately. Excellent guides who just want to showcase our incredible country and act as the real ambassadors of Israel. I mean, God bless our actual ambassadors in foreign capitals, but practically speaking, we are the daily ambassadors of our country to the world. So unfortunately, they're leaving the industry. They can't wait forever. They need to support their family. And the Israel Electric Company and the Water Authority
don't care.
Right.
So, which raises the question, is there, at least I will say this, in America, there's an awareness of how many people's livelihoods have been shattered. Is it even an issue in Israel, or is the entire issue safety?
I basically only see references to that on the Facebook page of the Israeli Minister of Tourism. I'm not sure of what he really is a minister, but when he posts various things on Facebook, people are posting, "We need help, enough talk, Mr. Minister, give us some action." But in general, I don't see this in the Israeli press of how much of an impact these lockdowns are having.
Or are you being aided financially by the government?
We were being aided, small businesses were being aided through the end of the Netanyahu government, and then with the start of the Bennett government, the Minister of Finance announced no more financial grants to small businesses. And by the way, we're keeping the skies closed so you can't support yourselves. Have a great day.
So I don't know if I told you this, but I know I didn't say it on the radio. I did a podcast with Benjamin Netanyahu's son, who has his own, Yair is his name. Yair Netanyahu has his own podcast. He's on the right in Israel, and he asked if he could have me on as a guest, which we did about 10 days ago. And I mentioned the lockdowns in passing. And he said to me, he looked at me, we were on, I don't know, Skype or Zoom, and he said, "This is the one area where we conservatives in Israel differ with you conservatives in America." And I found that very revealing. Even conservatives in Israel go along with the lockdowns.
Yes, I would agree with that. There is very little of a divide between liberals and conservatives in Israel on this.
Yeah.
Very sad to say.
Indeed it is. So now you're going back. When are you flying back?
So I will get back Friday afternoon. My children, Yona, Ahuva, Ma'ayan, Aderet, and Reuven.
5?
5, thank God. Abba will be home for Shabbat.
They're listening? Cool.
They are listening in Israel right now.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yes, they are.
Hey, guys. Look forward to meeting you. So, are they going to let you in? Do you have to quarantine? What's the story?
So, according to the latest rules, which may have changed in the past 20 minutes, I have no idea.
Right. That's
very
true.
possible.
Yep.
I will have to get a PCR test upon landing, find that standard, but then I will need to quarantine for up to 3 days until I can get a second test, and I've already posted on Facebook that I'm not going to do it. I am not going to quarantine. I am going to go out hiking with my children. I am not going to be a prisoner.
Let me tell the lifer children, you're lucky to have a father who doesn't walk around in fear. Really, really lucky. Aryeh Leifert, Israel Insider Tours. It's up at DennisPrager.com. Thank you, my friend. It's a joy to have you on.
Thank you very much. Happy Hanukkah, Dennis.
Dennis Prager Show.
trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Last night, the New York Times ran a headline, Social Spending Infrastructure Advances in-House. And I thought to myself, when did socialism go from big government to social spending infrastructure? Social spending infrastructure doesn't mean anything. It's never been a term of art. It doesn't have any meaning. It's a cover term for a vast hose of money on everything. This isn't going to get through the Senate, is it?
Oh, no, I don't think this is going to get through the Senate. And the infrastructure bill got through, but that's going to be about it on these big spending programs. And Pelosi and her crew want $4 trillion in spending. And, of course, I get it. Pelosi wants to pass this thing so that she can be an ambassador and head to Rome. What they're trying to do is cast one vote. And in that one vote, they want to take control of your kids, control of education, control of your health care, federalizing elections, changing immigration policy, then more provisions of the Green New Deal and a socialist economy.
Are you telling me that Speaker Pelosi, we're gonna visit her on the Pope? Is that what you're telling me?
We're hearing that is the goal. I don't talk to her, but what we're hearing is that she is looking forward to becoming an ambassador.
Now, look, Francis and I don't agree on much, but we cannot do that to the Pope.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you. You gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
There's no way to communicate.
You know the common phrase, oh my God, now it's Omicron. I'm going to adopt that. Omicron. It's surreal what we are living through. That's all I can say. Okay, let's see. Oh my God, that's interesting. Jan in Arizona. Tel Aviv relatives were happy to see how free we are here. That's mind-boggling. To come to America and think that we're free means it must be worse. I believe it is worse in Israel. That's why I covered this. Phoenix. Oh, another Arizona. Glenn, hello.
Hello?
Yep. Hi.
Hello. How you doing, Mr. President? Well, real quick, I want to preface what I'm going to say about about the Salvation Army. And
wait. That's not what you called about. You got to talk to me about what you called on.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Okay, so I'm called about the Salvation Army. I mean, not Salvation, about my family. We had Thanksgiving regular, but we have family members who we don't really speak to anymore. And we found out through a family member, one of my uncle's daughter, so a cousin, that my aunt was requiring people that visit her to get a COVID test. We didn't ask if it was a PCR or a rapid test. But my son and I just got back from Kauai, Hawaii on the 9th. We went there for 5 days for my best friend's wedding. And when you go to Hawaii, you have to take a PCR test 72 hours
I know.
before
I gave a lecture there this year, and that's what I had. In fact, I wasn't even allowed in because I didn't have a hotel yet. So I had to book the hotel while at the airport.
So yeah, we had everything done, and so I made a comment to her, and I said, "Well, Jeremy and I came back from Hawaii earlier in this month, and I said, who does Aunt so and so think she is? Hawaii, forcing people to get a test." I was being facetious, obviously, when I said that.
Why are relatives in your family not talking to each other?
Well, remember I told you this about a year ago when I said that if my grandma and grandpa were alive today, they would be disgusted because they have raised radical leftists who are raising their kids as radical leftists.
So it's politics so politics or COVID is the reason for the alienation?
Doesn't COVID mean politics now?
Okay, fair enough. Okay. The distinction is not all that clear. Greg in Whittier, California, should we support the Salvation Army? That's why you should be a Pragertopia subscriber to hear every hour commercial free. Pragertopia.com. That's what you should be doing, because then you would have heard my whole take on the Salvation Army. The left has taken over the Salvation Army and ruined it, and they are now anti-racist, microaggression, white supremacy people in the name of Christ. That's what Salvation Army has come to. Back soon.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
And that's why religious people are far more patriotic, frankly, about the Constitution, because they don't believe those rights were given to them by the state, but rather by something larger. And in Europe, I don't think that people believe that. They used to turn to monarchies, then they turned to fascism and communism, at least in the last 100 or more years, and it doesn't seem to work. And now they're just turning towards the European Union and bureaucrats to sort of guide them as their new priests.
One of the reasons I am always curious about why Europe went this way, but why America admires it, how come we got this disease when it's clearly not working? And I think the answer is in what I call the semester abroad disease. It's like mad cow disease. If you spend a semester abroad when you're 21, you have a wonderful time. You eat well, you have a party for 6 months, and then you come home and you extrapolate from that everything must be like being a student in Europe for 6 months when there's nothing at all to do with an American having fun in Europe for 6 months. David, this all started to rise in the United States when we started to ship our college students away for a semester in Florence. And then they come back and they think, wow, Europe is great.
That as well, I had thought about that, but also just tourism, right? I mean, when we go to Europe, it's beautiful. When people go to Hungary, they sit by the river, the Danube, and sip coffee. But in the real world, about a mile out of the city, things aren't that way. The American home, I think on average, I might be wrong about this, but it's close. It's about 1,000 square feet bigger than the average European home. We live in mansions in our suburbs that most Europeans would not be able to comprehend.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Creeps who've had some financial success in life. We're the bad. We need to be punished. Although not Pelosi. Did you hear she pushed back on the capital gains tax increase? She didn't like that, and she's a wealthy woman. But anyway, it turns out the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center has taken a look at Build Back Better. They're saying about 30% of middle-income households will be taxed and pay additional taxes, have a tax increase in 2022. Whoops! No, say it isn't so, Joe. Say it isn't so. Come on.
Come on, man.
Did you lie to us again? Did you not tell the truth? And some low and middle class and middle income households, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, which has reviewed Build Back Better, they will pay more per year in taxes if the plan is implemented. You know, obviously they sat around the White House, they said, let's try this. Let's say that this massive spending won't cost anything. You know, it'll be a little bit like Biden calling Satchel Paige a Negro, and then we'll say he didn't call Satchel Paige a Negro. We'll see if they buy it. It doesn't cost a thing. It's free. Just like free college is really free. Wink, wink. Bunch of liars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Burka.
Right now, based upon how the judge is responding to the way that this evil bunch of hyenas are trying to make... the fact of the matter is this. Rittenhouse killed 2 people. Both of them were criminals. One of them had just been released from jail for doing what? Raping young boys. If it were up to me, that would be a death penalty automatic in America. Rape a child, death. End of story. That's the reason nations create capital punishment. He got out, which is just so understanding and empathetic of us. He threatened people all day, and then he used force and threatened Kyle Rittenhouse, who was there to help people when he wasn't a community pool lifeguard. And that man shot to death. The child rapist. Rot in hell. The second man, oh yes, with a rap sheet for what? Assaulting women. He got killed as well after he swung at Kyle Rittenhouse with a skateboard to his head. Not a lot of tears will be shed for that man, I'm sure, in any community of decent Americans. And then the third guy who approached him with a Glock pointed to Kyle's head, who then had his bicep blown off by that brave young man. Come on, guys. Acquit, or better yet, mistrial.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Man, I miss my father, and I want him to be here with me, but he's not. We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hello, my friends. Dennis Prager here. I have as a guest a man I profoundly admire, which in and of itself is important, at least to me, and I'm sure to many of you. But the fact that he is in American medicine, a group of human beings and institutions that I deeply respected till 2 years ago, and for which I now have large contempt, the fact that he is a heroic doctor makes it even more remarkable. We want to talk about that. He is Dr. Scott Atlas. He's a former professor and chief of neuroradiology at Stanford University Medical School, or Medical Center. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. Has come out with a truly significant book, which is coming out actually in a week, but you could, of course, order it. A Plague Upon Our House, My Fight at the Trump White House to Stop COVID from Destroying America. It's up at DennisPrager.com. Dr. Atlas, thank you for coming on.
Okay, thank you for having me.
By the way, you could see Dr. Atlas if right now a lot of these interviews are done by video. How do people get to it?
Go to YouTube.
YouTube?
Just go to YouTube.
And put in what? Search what?
Just go to YouTube, Dennis Prager.
YouTube, Dennis Prager? Cool. All right, Dr. Atlas. By the way, where are you right now?
I'm in my house in Palo Alto, California.
Oh, you're in the Bay Area, which makes perfect sense. You're at the Hoover Institution. Why did you leave Stanford?
Well, I didn't leave Stanford. I went temporarily when the White House called me and asked if I would help the president and the country. But that was a temporary position that was only defined as what's called special government employee for 130 days. I didn't leave Stanford. Hoover is an institution on Stanford campus. And so Hoover is part of Stanford University. And now I'm back as a senior fellow, which is essentially
all right, so I should have been more precise. Did you leave the medical school?
Okay, so I came in 1998 to be professor and chief of neuroradiology at Stanford University Medical Center. And at the time, I started working on healthcare policy and gradually shifted. So about 10 years ago, I resigned completely from the medical school to take a full-time endowed position at Stanford Hoover Institution in healthcare policy. So I've been working on healthcare policy for about 17 years, but full-time, completely out of the medical school for more than a decade. And I did that, if you ask me why, because it's very important to understand medicine, the delivery of medical care, the value of tertiary care medicine, the value of medical technology, if you're going to opine or formulate healthcare policy and reform the healthcare system in the United States. And what I found was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were a lot of people at the table talking about healthcare reform, but they didn't understand any of those other issues. And since I was in a very technology-based part of medicine, I had something to contribute there, I think.
Okay, which is certainly true. So what did President Trump ask you to do?
Well, I was called up by the White House first in sort of late July to ask would I come and speak to the president. And so, of course, the answer is yes. I was a health policy scholar. We're in the middle of the biggest healthcare policy crisis in a century. So I said yes. And I went and I was sort of speaking with all the intimate advisors of the president, with the vice president. And at the end of the day, Jared Kushner, as I outlined in my book, said, we would like you to help. Would you be willing to help? And of course, healthcare policy crisis, my country, of course, the answer is yes, but I wanted to make sure that they knew what they were getting because I'm a certain kind of person and I'm not political. And so I said, I just want to make sure that you understand I'm not going to change my opinion, no matter who tells me to. If I don't agree with that, I'm not going to sign into a group statement like by the task force or anyone else if I don't agree. And I'm not going to repeat what someone says, no matter who says it, unless I agree with that. And so to Jared Kushner's credit, he said, that's exactly why we want you. And so that was very reassuring. And then the next part of the conversation was not so reassuring because Jared said to me, I just want you to know if this becomes public, they're going to destroy you, and I'm concerned about that. And that took me by surprise. First of all, I wasn't expecting him to care, but he did. And it also took me by surprise because I'm I'm not political. I'm politically naive. I wasn't prepared for that. And so I said, okay, maybe I'll just go home and try to do that from home in California. And that doesn't work very well to do things from a distance when everything is hitting the fan and the president's up for saying things. And so I said, okay, I'll come back. And I stayed in Washington for about 3.5 months. And my role, by the way, was an advisor to the president. And they also insisted I was in on the task.
They also insisted that you were what?
Sitting in on the task force meetings.
Right.
And I say it that way because I didn't want to be on the task force. And the reasoning that I had was very simple. Task force was functioning for about 6 months before I walked in the door. And they were doing the wrong things, and they were all over TV saying the wrong things. But they were very, they're committed to what they're doing. And they're not going to change what they think because I say something different. And so I was very negative about the idea that we could change anyone's mind. And of course, I was proven to be right. I didn't change my mind. But it created a lot of hostility when you're in there as the only person against sort of what is a troika of medical doctors, Birx, Fauci, and Redfield, who were not just wedded to the wrong policies, but they had a shared interest in backing each other up. And instead of detailing out the science, critically assessing things. And, I was very different from them in so many ways.
If you had been in charge and those three had been insignificant and you had dictatorial power over medical policy during COVID in 2020, what would you have done?
I would have done what I said back when I first started researching and writing COVID in March of 2020, 6 months before I went to Washington, which was something called targeted protection. I mean, basically it's common sense in a way. You have people who are vulnerable, who are for serious illness or death. I mean, 80% of people who died are over 65, and the average age of death is roughly 80. And 2/3 of people who die from COVID have greater than or equal to 6 underlying medical conditions. This is not the healthy people who die. So my assessment was, okay, let's use targeted protection. Let's double down on protecting people who have a risk for serious illness or death. And that means increased testing in anyone who interacts with them, including particularly nursing home residents, where the staff should be tested every single day. They bring in all the cases, yet when I got to DC in August, the recommendation was testing nursing home staff once a week. So I said, okay, increase the testing increase the protections of senior centers where non-residential settings where seniors frequent, increased personal protective equipment at historically Black colleges and universities because their faculty are high risk, but also open schools safely. Isolate symptomatic people, make sure they understand they can't mingle with others. But we need to stop the destruction of the lockdowns, because the lockdowns, closing schools, stopping medical care for non-COVID, destroying families, particularly low-income families, were not just destroying people economically, they were killing people. We had 2/3 of cancer screenings didn't get done during the summer. We had 85% of living organ transplants didn't get done because people were afraid to come into hospital. Half of stroke and heart attack patients didn't call an ambulance because they were afraid to go into a medical facility. So this idea that you should close what they called non-essential medical care was closing serious medical care. And so massive numbers of people died. It's already documented, even back in the summer, that about 1/3 of deaths during the lockdowns for the pandemic, 1/3 were non-COVID deaths.
All right, hold on there, Dr. Atlas. I just want to remind people, your book, A Plague Upon Our House, up at DennisPrager.com.
trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Then we are going to bring in innovative charter schools. Most people don't know that public charter schools are public schools, and so they fight against it. They worship the building instead of the child, and we're not going to just keep throwing money at that. In fact, I put in a charter school bill 20 years ago when I was first in office, but we were stopped.
Now, let's pause there for a moment, Lieutenant Governor-elect Sears. The appointments of the Secretary of Education and the Superintendent of Education are, I think, the two most important that Governor Youngkin, when he becomes Governor Youngkin, makes. Have you counseled with him on who those individuals ought to be and what their orientation ought to be towards charter schools?
Well, Governor-elect Youngkin, oh boy, do I love saying that. Governor-elect Youngkin has promised us he's going to fire the current superintendent. Day one, fire this current superintendent. Now, I believe he's going to have at least 2 appointments almost immediately on the board because, they roll off.
Yes.
But the board has been stacked now for the past, but we can't really get rid of the policies that we have unless we get rid of some of the laws that we have, you see, because what they're doing is implementing the laws, which is why we needed the House, because we've got to bring back some of that and get rid of it, for example, CRT. And, unfortunately, this left-wing media has been gaslighting us to let us know that, well, there is no such thing as CRT, when we have seen with our own eyes that back in 2015, the Virginia State Board of Education put it on their website and put books recommending the reading of such and the teaching of such.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Obama tore this country down. No one stood up to him. Nobody. Because he was black. You need to wake up.
You was your house nigga. I didn't call you a nigga.
Oh, okay. That's a big difference.
You're Uncle Tom.
And Uncle Tom is somebody who has sold out by embracing the white man.
Uncle Tom,
Bedwench,
bootlicker,
black white supremacist,
chucking and jiving,
house Negro,
coon,
Uncle Tom,
coon.
I
have a coon award over there. Most black people don't believe that other blacks can be independent, free thinkers.
I believe the legacy and the ancestry of black Americans is being insulted every single day. I will not pretend to be a victim in this country. I know that makes many people on the left uncomfortable.
The liberal will try to control a black person through the concept of racism because they know that we are very proud, emotional people.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Man, I miss my father, and I want him to be here with me, but he's not. We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager. We'll return to Dr. Scott Atlas in a moment. If you're worried about what's being taught to kids, and you should be, please know that Hillsdale College, one of the only conservative colleges, conservative only means, by the way, they teach what's true. They teach the truth, they teach beauty, and they teach that which elevates students. That's what they're dedicated to. They have made a Hillsdale 1776 curriculum. It's downloadable for free. No charge. K12.hillsdale.edu. K12, not K212, not K-12, K12, K12.hillsdale.edu. It's for you, it's for your children, and it's a terrific course. Download Hillsdale's 1776 curriculum for free. K12.hillsdale.edu, edu for educational institution. Truly significant book is coming out this week. A Plague Upon Our House, my fight at the Trump White House to stop COVID from destroying America. Dr. Atlas, who was formerly with Stanford Medical Center and is now with the Hoover Institution at Stanford, is my guest. So I don't know if you know this, and there would be no reason you would, but some of us were saying what you were saying. Some of us in public life were saying what you were saying at the White House from very early on, that this was a horrible thing to do, these lockdowns. So you mentioned Redfield, Fauci, and Birx. So here's a question you may or may not have an answer to, but I don't have an answer to. That may explain America. What explains virtually every other government in the world?
Yeah, I mean the question.
No, we're not hearing Dr. Atlas, Sean. There's no audio. Okay.
Can you
I'm
hear
sorry,
me now?
everybody.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that you realize that on the screen it says Chief of Neuroradiology. I'm not Chief of Neuroradiology. I have no title at Stanford Medical School for the last decade. So please correct that. But
No, when I said it, I said formerly.
No, he's talking.
Yeah, I know. It was just visible.
Oh, it's on the screen. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, you're right.
Can't have that. I'm totally against misinformation.
That's
been the biggest problem that we've had during this year.
Correct.
The question about why other countries did this, I mean, there are several answers that are possible. Number one, we have incompetent people who are not critical thinkers in charge and power. That's really an observation that I think is legitimate. We had people in charge all over the world who reacted to the early erroneous projections of the World Health Organization about the extremely high infection fatality rate. The lethality of the infection was grossly off base. For anyone who is a doctor, critical thinker should have seen that. But in addition, the computer modelers then weighed in. They made these worst case scenario, very error-prone models, and they were amplified by apparently a very fearful media and very fearful people in government. And this had a life of its own. It's hard to figure out why that took off, but we had an absence of critical thinking, and it was amplified really by a media who, for whatever reason, sort of didn't really examine anything except maybe because we're in a world where the click on a website matters, or social media has become a conduit of a lot of information, whether it's true or not. But people ran with false information, and the wrong people were in charge. And so what happened was, instead of having critical thinkers in charge of U.S. policy, which we had government bureaucrats in charge. Drs. Birx and Fauci are in their government positions for 40 years. You don't do that because you're politically neutral. You do that because you understand how to navigate a heavily politicized situation, make friends in the media, etc. And I say American because you have to realize the American faces on TV, the America in general, has a tremendous influence on other countries' policy. There's no question that the people you see on TV here are all over the world, influencing the public discourse, but also influencing government decisions. And so that had a life of its own. It's hard to figure out the answer to why. I'm sort of hypothesizing.
Let me ask you a couple of more questions. What is your position on therapeutics, like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin?
Well, I think that the problem with these drugs is that this is one of the big problems with the NIH and the U.S. health agencies is they thwarted the studies that should have been done a year ago on the readily available, safe drugs that are FDA approved for decades, like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. And instead of that, they frightened the public, they stopped the clinical trials from being done. And so what we're left with is an indecisive set of studies on these kinds of drugs. Now, our drugs that were developed, but the problem, just like it happened during the HIV era, run by the same people, by the way, was that we had a single-minded focus on getting a vaccine and instead dropped the ball on rapidly developing therapeutics. So my point here is that the studies heinously were not done. It should have been done and completed a year ago that would have really proven value or not of these readily attainable drugs. We have other drugs like monoclonal antibodies which were developed under Operation Warp Speed, which are very effective, but they were never widely used for some reason. I don't know why. And we have new drugs being used. So it's a very complicated answer. I don't understand why those things were done, but it was, again, an example of grossly misguided public health leadership in the United States.
Yeah. Dr. Risch of Yale said to me that he thought that we had killed basically hundreds of thousands of Americans by not engaging in therapeutics. How do you react to that statement?
I think Dr. Risch is more expert on the data on the drugs than I am, and I will sort of defer to him on that. But it certainly is true that a lack of focus on drug treatments, and these are drugs, by the way, that on their simply what's called mechanism of action in a laboratory would seem to work even before any clinical data. They should have been investigated right away, and so it would not surprise me if that were true.
Yeah, all right. Well, I thank you, sir. I thank you. We're going to have you on again. Dr. Rattles's book is up at DennisPrager.com.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
And that's why religious people are far more patriotic, frankly, about the Constitution, because they don't believe those rights were given to them by the state, but rather by something larger. And in Europe, I don't think that people believe that. They used to turn to monarchies, then they turned to fascism and communism, at least in the last 100 or more years, and it doesn't seem to work. And now they're just turning towards the European Union and bureaucrats to sort of guide them as their new priests.
One of the reasons I am always curious about why Europe went this way, but why America admires it, how come we got this disease when it's clearly not working? And I think the answer is in what I call the semester abroad disease. It's like mad cow disease. If you spend a semester abroad when you're 21, you have a wonderful time. You eat well, you have a party for 6 months, and then you come home and you extrapolate from that everything must be like being a student in Europe for 6 months when there's nothing at all to do with an American having fun in Europe for 6 months. David, this all started to rise in the United States when we started to ship our college students away for a semester in Florence. And then they come back and they think, wow, Europe is great.
That as well, I had thought about that, but also just tourism, right? I mean, when we go to Europe, it's beautiful. When people go to Hungary, they sit by the river, the Danube, and sip coffee. But in the real world, about a mile out of the city, things aren't that way. The American home, I think on average, I might be wrong about this, but it's close. It's about 1,000 square feet bigger than the average European home. We live in mansions in our suburbs that most Europeans would not be able to comprehend.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Creeps who've had some financial success in life. We're the bad. We need to be punished. Although not Pelosi. Did you hear she pushed back on the capital gains tax increase? She didn't like that, and she's a wealthy woman. But anyway, it turns out the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center has taken a look at Build Back Better. They're saying about 30% of middle-income households will be taxed and pay additional taxes, have a tax increase in 2022. Whoops! No, say it isn't so, Joe. Say it isn't so. Come on.
Come on, man.
Did you lie to us again? Did you not tell the truth? And some low and middle class and middle income households, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, which has reviewed Build Back Better, they will pay more per year in taxes if the plan is implemented. You know, obviously they sat around the White House, they said, let's try this. Let's say that this massive spending won't cost anything. You know, it'll be a little bit like Biden calling Satchel Paige a Negro, and then we'll say he didn't call Satchel Paige a Negro. We'll see if they buy it. It doesn't cost a thing. It's free. Just like free college is really free. Wink, wink. Bunch of liars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
My entire hundreds of hours of Bible teaching are half price at the Prager store. And there are only 100 CDs left. They're not manufacturing the CD version anymore, but MP3 with its own player even. And, of course, simplest of all, on a thumb drive, just stick it in your computer and read it, or listen to it, I should say. It's available at half price for the 1 day a year today. Prager store, DennisPrager.com. I was telling my producer and friend, known to you as the Living Martyr, known to me as the Living, how much I should do a show on this, how much I have rethought items, big subjects over the course of the last 2 years. Big revelations about life that have come to me, that this crisis has made clear. Here's one. Maybe I'll do an Ultimate Issues Hour on this, but I do want to share it with you because I'm so disturbed by the loss of the Salvation Army to leftism. So I was saying here, I've come to realize how few truly religious people there are. There are many people who believe in Christ, as Christians, obviously. There are many people, many Jews, who are very strict about observance of Jewish laws. Both are wonderful things in their respective religions. But when push comes to shove, do you fear God or fear man? And that's the push comes to shove issue for me. Most Christians and most Jews, I'm talking about religious ones, fail. It's not an attack. It's not at all. It is a lament, but it's not an attack. A lot of these people are sweet people. But if religion doesn't give you courage, then it's useless. It's truly useless. That is the defining element of whether you're religious. Has religion given you courage? You know what God says to human beings the most in the Bible? Do not be afraid. Religious people don't take it seriously. Most religious people, Jew or Christian. What will they say? What will they say is more important than what will God say? What will they say? Heads of the Salvation Army I have no doubt, believe in Christ deeply. On the biggest issue of the day, that belief is worthless. Worthless. They have joined the mob in attacking this country. So their religiosity is worthless. It's sad. I was one of the biggest fundraisers for the Salvation Army in the United States. And now to attack those like Greg Koukl, the great Christian thinker, broadcaster, and writer, dear friend of mine, for the record, and saying, well, people like him have an agenda. Yeah, they do have an agenda. It's called Christianity. It's called America. It's called guts. That's my bottom line. If religion hasn't made you courageous, you're not religious. That's it. Was it James who said, right? By fruit we know the tree, or something to that effect. I'm sorry? You shall know them by their fruit. The fruit of religiosity is courage. See, that's an example of something I did not realize until this past year. I could write a small book on the revelations of this year. The following is not a revelation. What I'm about to say I knew before this year or last 2 years, but it has become so clear in the last 2 years. Most people do not value liberty. That's it. Most people on earth, even Americans. There's always something more important than liberty for the vast majority of human beings. I was raised with Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death." Made a big impact on me. I believed it. Most of my generation didn't. The next generation isn't even taught it. I wonder if there are 10 students at Harvard who could identify Patrick Henry.
Relief Factor.
ReliefFactor.com. That's where you go to order or to read about the effect it's had on people. It's a wonder drug. I don't know if drug is the right word, but because you don't need a prescription. But it's a wonder drug. It's like a miracle pill, because it relieves the vast majority of its users of most or all of their muscle or joint pain. And here's the honest thing that they say that is unique, in my opinion, among products. If it doesn't work in 3 weeks, it probably won't work. How's that for a product maker? So you have a 3-week price of $19.95 plus shipping, to be precise. Give it that try. ReliefFactor.com, 800-500-8384.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
History-making tax and spend disaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And this is why people were so angry at the Republicans in the Senate and the House who have supported Biden's scheme. Did you hear Trump was giving a speech Monday night? The Republican Congressional Committee had a dinner, and he blasted the 13 Republicans in the House. I think Nicole Maliotakis was in the room. She had to be squirming, because I'm sure President Trump held back, as he does. I'm sure he was very genteel and, very discreet.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
This is why we're fighting for the soul of America.
You should be able to share ideas without fear of being fired from your job or shouted down.
You are not to be heard. This is one of the few things we have no precedent for in the United States.
You have the right to remain silent.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Man, I miss my father. And I want him to be here with me, but he's not. We all had something in common. A lot of us were miserable. We had no fathers in our lives.
This is how I began the life of crime. I desired to have a father who would tell me that what I did was wrong.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Okay. All right, y'all. Once again, I want to remind you the once-a-year sale on my Teaching the Bible, the 5 books, first 5 books, the Torah. It's at half price, 1 day a year. It's at thepragerstore.com or just at my website, dennisprager.com. Yeah, it's been a revelatory 2 years about religious people. It's a new thought. I literally have this thought today. You're hearing the genesis of a big idea. If your religion doesn't give you courage, you're not religious. That's it. You have to judge anything by its effects. If it doesn't have an effect, if gravity is not pulling an object toward it, then there is no gravity, right? If religion is not producing courage, it's not religion. It's got the trappings of religion, like the Salvation Army heads. That's what did it for me. They are certain they deeply believe in Christ, but they're more afraid of the left-wing mob than of God. Most Christians and most Jews are. They're more afraid of the left-wing mob than they are of God. That's it. That's a big one. All right, let's see here. Professor asked USC students, did they know who had his name? Oh, Patrick Henry. That's interesting. Is that your real name, Patrick Henry?
Yes, my grandfather is Patrick Henry. My grandson is Patrick Henry.
Wait, your grandfather was? Oh, but you're not.
Well, his name was Patrick Henry. My name is Patrick Henry, and my grandson's name is also Patrick Henry.
So he's Patrick Henry the Third.
No, he has his own moniker in the middle.
Okay, cool. So what is it? Are you at the USC?
Yeah, I'm a professor, assistant professor emeritus, retired. and very close to a lot of students, and I've shared policy issues with students, never politics, often with big hugs saying no one's ever talked like this. And I often ask students when they're in my office or we're doing work sessions, I said, so who's Patrick Henry? And probably 1 out of 10 know his name, and half of those, less than that, can give me liberty or give me death quote.
Well, there you go. Thank you, sir. You have a great name. Yeah, I took all those things seriously when I look back at it. I took religion seriously. I took America seriously. I took Superman seriously. What is it? What is the motto again? Truth, justice, and the American way. Yeah. I took all. I said, yeah, that's what it means to be an American. Truth. By the way, they've changed that now. By the way, Superman is no longer an American. This was about 10 years ago. He renounced his American citizenship. The left has taken over Superman. The left has destroyed Superman. Everything the left touches, it destroys. I used to say ruins. Now I've gone further. But there's no exception. None. I was reading to you. This is a big deal. So you can avoid depression. New York Times readers, subscribers, it's a lot of money. They subscribe to the New York Times, at least the digital, maybe both digital and physical, which we at my show do, just for the record. And they are the only ones allowed to comment, which is fine. They subscribe, they can comment. So it's not open to any outsider to write stuff. So this is New York Times readers. Michelle Goldberg, who is a non-thinking, truly non-thinking leftist. She's robotic. Whatever she just defends all leftist nihilism, including the schools. And amazingly, reader after reader knocked her at the New York Times. Basically said she lies when she denies that the schools are teaching. The whole left is lying. They're writing this. I started to read to you, so what I did was I checked off, when you read comments, you could check, do you want it by newest? You want it by oldest? Do you want it, in other words, the first comment first, or the latest comment first, or by popularity? So I checked off popularity. And the number one was Democrats need to do more than get schools, just knocking the Democrats and praising Republicans for keeping schools open. The second one, the second most popular one, with 590 recommendations, thousands write in, not everybody votes, writes and I read to you the whole paragraph, I'll just read to you the end. The left is destroying the Democratic Party. New York Times. Third most popular. From Carmen in Philadelphia. Michelle, that is Michelle Goldberg, the automaton leftist. The racialist ideology is not a right-wing fantasy. Wow. This is amazing. The third most popular comment among New York Times subscribers. It's the meat and potatoes of my kids' school and many other schools ever since George Floyd. That means that liberals are awakening to the destruction of the schools taking place. What did they say? It was the parents' revolt in Virginia that got Youngkin elected? This might be evidence of such. Back in a moment.
trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Then we are going to bring in innovative charter schools. Most people don't know that public charter schools are public schools, and so they fight against it. They worship the building instead of the child, and we're not going to just keep throwing money at that. In fact, I put in a charter school bill 20 years ago when I was first in office, but we were stopped.
Now, let's pause there for a moment, Lieutenant Governor-elect Sears. The appointments of the Secretary of Education and the Superintendent of Education are, I think, the two most important that Governor Youngkin, when he becomes Governor Youngkin, makes. Have you counseled with him on who those individuals ought to be and what their orientation ought to be towards charter schools?
Well, Governor-elect Youngkin, oh boy, do I love saying that. Governor-elect Youngkin has promised us he's going to fire the current superintendent. Day one, fire this current superintendent. Now, I believe he's going to have at least 2 appointments almost immediately on the board because, they roll off.
Yes.
But the board has been stacked now for the past, but we can't really get rid of the policies that we have unless we get rid of some of the laws that we have, you see, because what they're doing is implementing the laws, which is why we needed the House, because we've got to bring back some of that and get rid of it, for example, CRT. And, unfortunately, this left-wing media has been gaslighting us to let us know that, well, there is no such thing as CRT, when we have seen with our own eyes that back in 2015, the Virginia State Board of Education put it on their website and put books recommending the reading of such and the teaching of such.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you. You gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Okay, y'all. I'm going to read to you tomorrow as well these phenomenal comments in the New York Times. I got so many more. So the question is, these readers who say the left is destroying the Democratic Party, well, why wouldn't it? The left destroys everything it touches. So will they vote Republican? And I would say that the vast majority will not. So they see what the left has done to our schools, the utter contempt for children that the teachers union has. Teachers unions, sorry about that, bang the microphones. Teachers unions are truly vile institutions. They hurt students. That's their, because students are of no interest to them except filling chairs with them so that they get more money. But anyway, it's not rare. Look at the American Medical Association. But the big disappointment of today is the Salvation Army. They have an international social justice commission. I mean, it's not just this one book on racism. They have a social justice commission. The International Social Justice Commitment, and study guides on racism and on sexism, caring for the environment. Yes, the left has taken over. If the leaders don't resign, don't give them a penny. and write them a letter and write a letter to your local newspaper telling them why. But it is what it is. So every generation has to fight again for the most basic things. Okay, let's see here. Francine, Philadelphia. Will Republicans embrace parents' grassroots efforts to take the republic back? I don't know. Well, I assume that they are. I mean, that's who else is? But will the Republican Party fight in this regard? Some will. Many will, I think. Robert, Carmichael, California. Our society is going the way of other no longer existing civilizations. That's correct. But a lot of us are aware of that, and we're fighting. And the battle is not lost yet. I want to make that clear to you. Okay. Listen, final note. Today is Cyber Monday. You can get all my teachings of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, at half price, whether it's on CD, MP3, with a player, or on a thumb drive at the Prager store just today. It's life-changing stuff, even if you're an atheist. And it's enjoyable. Okay, everybody, it's the Prager store at DennisPrager.com. See you tomorrow.